wanting to be involved and really excited about wanting to have something to do with what was going on.
And he has done pro bono work for here before.
He has, okay.
I would imagine, knowing Jonathan, that he would probably be only too happy to do it again.
I have one other question, if I may, and then I'll shut up. When I first moved here 9.5, 10 years ago, whatever it was, there was the students from from WVU that came in.
Design.
Yes,
Design.
and I've got pictures of some of that. They did
Is any of this being revisited and possibly implemented in the redevelopment plan?
Was it the West Virginia Design?
I believe it was, and they did an exceptional job.
Yeah, there's, you know, they may say, well, we were there once before, but yeah, we'll need to look at that. They just completed something for Linnell, and they've been in Union, and, you know, I know they've been around. That's part of this whole thing we need to look at in terms of all the resources that are out there in catalog. How do they fit? How all does it all work? What I was going to say is one of the things that you can do in regard to expatriates that want to come home, okay, is throughout this whole process is plan a way of getting them back, okay, providing the kind of thing, not just in terms of buildings and that kind of thing that they can use, but the other resources. For an example, a young architect like that may be able to come home and practice if we have enough of a broadband capability. And which would have been, John knows this, beating this thing to death for a long time. But if we're going to have the kind of communities we want to have, especially in central Appalachia, where people can be in remote locations and still coexist and work and make a living with the outside world, we have to demand that these things come to our table and be brought here. And that's going to be all of this. I mean, this is a very transitional period, not just for Marlin, but for central Appalachia altogether, okay? Because there's a lot of this recognition of how are we going to, where are we going to be in 20 years, and how are we going to, what are we going to be like? And what do we have to do to get there? And we're not demanding enough out of our governments. We're not asking enough of our private sector, okay, to be involved. Those are the things that, and I'm not saying we're going to solve all these problems with this, but these are a lot of the issues that we have to, when we're planning this and looking at Arlington and saying, this is what we're going to do with Arlington now in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years, that have to be taken into consideration. These are opportunities that we better plan for, okay, and not ignore.
If I can make one last suggestion off of just my own experience. Last summer, the summer before, I went over to Clifton Forge, another small town that's struggled to rebound, railroad town, blah, blah, blah. And I was looking at opportunities potentially to open a second location over there due to the proximity of a lot, but primarily Douthit State Park is a huge mountain bike destination. When I went over there just to look, there were people out there courting me, from the economic development person to the historical person to they provided me a hardbound book of information for their economic development person, what properties were available, just resources in general, and handed it to me and said, here, this is what we have available. There's a building over here that a similar group, a housing authority or the town of Clifton Forge bought. We're leasing it back for a ridiculously low rent, like $1 a month or something. I mean, it was ridiculous. They were doing these things solely for the purpose of enticing small businesses and Main Street type businesses, retail, restaurants, that sort of thing, just to get those places going. That's what their intention was. And they were developing a shuttle between Douthit State Park and Clifton Forge. So just to look at communities very similar I mean, granted, they don't have the flood issues and some of the problems we have here. But to go to those small communities similar to ourselves that have suffered when the mills died and the lumber died and the, you know, whatever, and use some of their economic development plans and tweak it. Obviously, we got to tweak it, but go to Clifton Forge, see what they did, and it was successful. I mean, their town is starting to pop back up with all kinds of independent merchants, and primarily around tourism. The train, Douthit State Park, they have a little art college there, actually, a private art college that started up. So those are just things that I hope in this process that you guys are working on, that you may look at other models of towns similar to Marlinton and see what we can do to get independents back into town and to actually court them with a plan, with resources like you're trying to get now.
If there are a lot of examples. I mean, Lewisburg is a good example of a community that was rebuilt using art and the arts and that kind of thing, and now it's expanding out. There's a lot of that kind of stuff out and around. A lot of it has to do specifically when we look at Virginia versus, for example, West Virginia's money and what can be thrown at it and what they can throw at it and what we can throw at it or can't throw at it. I come from another state and practiced there for a while before I came here. Similar to Virginia.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we can't do everything like Virginia. Obviously, they have a higher population base and a bigger tax base to operate from. I'm just saying look at some of the things they've put together in order to, you know, I mean, just that's all I'm saying. Obviously, we're different in many ways, but to not look at some of those things and just say, well, we don't have we don't have the revenue and the people that Virginia has, and dismiss it as that is self-defeating.
Well, I always tell my staff that money is not a problem. Good ideas are the problem. And when you get good ideas, you generally have money and find the money for them. And so I think that's where we're at the stage where we really need to try to get our good ideas together, do our planning, and have something to go after and develop. And that's what we're trying to do.